We continue with the Otzar HaMichtavim of Rabbi Messas, during some of his psakim. So here we have a situation with marital strife, and that became physical abuse. That unfortunately, like even now, we see in Israel that the rabbis, the husband beating the wife. And there was a case now in Israel where 200 rabbis refused to help a woman get through a get. There's a psak from the late 80s that Rabbi Ovadia is also signed on with 2 other Ashkenazi rabbis, where a woman was threatened and abused by her husband physically, and every time she came to Bedin, they said, "No, go back with him. It's okay." They tried to, not to force a divorce. Until he pulled out a gun and tried to shoot her, and then they say, "Okay, this is enough to justify a divorce." So this is really should not happen. And this is what Rabbi Messas says. He writes to the city of Megrania and to the head of the community, to the president of the community. He says, he mentions his name. I spoke for 2 or 3 times with the president of your community regarding that man. Said that I subpoena him. I want him to come to Bedin. לעמוד בדין עם אשתו, אשר בעין הזה שבועיים מלאה פצעים וחבורות מאגרוף רשע ידו החזקה. He said the woman came to Bedin. She showed her, physical evidence to what he did to her. He calls it אגרוף רשע, a wicked fist, based on the pasuk in Yeshayahu, להכל באגרוף רשע, כאשר העידו שכניה נמצאים פה לפני הקומיסר. So, and her neighbors also testified that this happened. They know that this was going on. And the commissar, the local police, wanted to get the husband and to punish him. ועמדו קרוביו בפרץ. But his relatives got into the issue and defended him and stopped it. ונמסר הדבר בידי לשלוח אחריו, ודיברתי עם הנשיא הלז, והבטיח לשולחו והעלים עין זה 3 פעמים. Says, so it became my responsibility. I spoke to the president. Remember this, you don't have phones. This is Tarpaz, 1887. So everything is by mail, very slow. So he said, this is now my responsibility. I sent him messages several times to bring him to court. And I spoke with the president, and he refused also. And he says, he says, I conclude by the lack of action on behalf of this president that he's related to the man and he's also involved in protecting him. He says, ובכן עליך מצווה לשלוח על הבעל הנזכר ולקרוא עליו את הקריאה לך לך להנאתך ולטובתך. It's also שיעור בתנ"ך. Like when you read his text, it says, you as the local rabbi, it's your obligation to call him. He says, call upon him this announcement. This is taken from the book of Yonah, when Hashem tells Yonah, "Lech el Nineveh vekarata alea et hakerea." Like it's a very severe warning. Lech lecha lehana'atcha ultovatcha. This is the language of the summons. This one is taken from the Midrash on Parashat Lech Lecha, when Hashem tells Avraham, "Lech lecha." So go for you, sort of, and the Midrash says, go for your own benefit. So he says to the rabbi, tell the husband that for him to come to Bedin is for his own benefit. Why? Im lo yavo lemachar, he gives him a deadline. Odia et hashoter veya'aleu b'haka veya'anishahu kashe v'shalom. So his conclusion is that this is the last warning. If you don't come, I'm going to notify the local police, and they're going to get the husband and punish him, and that's it. So we see that according to Rabbi Messas, in cases like domestic abuse, there's no delay. If he sees that there's evidence, the husband should be notified, the local police. Even we're not talking about modern Israeli law enforcement or America. We're talking about the Moroccan or Algerian police of more than 100 years ago. And he says, I will head him over to the police. Unfortunately, for some reason, this is something that has been that is still being ignored, even in not in Jewish courts, even in American courts. There were many, many cases where husbands threatened their wives, and the women were begging for restraint order, and they didn't get it, and they were killed. It's ruined. The husband came and used lethal force and killed their wife. So for him, it's something that has to be expedited and done very, very fast.
Well, in some societies, it's almost normal. I mean, like in Muslim societies, men have.
I would say this. It's not. It's sort of a natural tendency of mankind. There are two tendencies here. One is violence. People tend to be violent, to take their aggression on others. And the second is that it's like what Hachamim call the alim gevar, that people rule by brute force. So once one person feels that another one is under his control, that's how they feel. Now, Russia issued a law recently that the husband is allowed to slap his wife or his children to educate them. We had this also in the past. If you go back 1,000 years, Maimonides says that a husband is allowed to administer physical force to educate his wife. And in Poland, the Rema, about 500 years ago, also said that a woman should be educated. The only way to educate is there. But we've sort of grown, right? We've matured through this. We understand that this is not the thing. But in some Muslim societies, it's not that everybody does that, but the clerics take it on. Someone sent me a video yesterday that memory translated. It has to be understood. Not everybody thinks that way. There are modern Muslims, clerics, and they are more extreme. But people take the law and interpret it according to their agenda. So this guy was saying how, since in the Quran there is a sort of like a mandate for the husband to beat his wife, it's done for the well-being of the wife, and she should be thankful, and so on, and everybody will inherit heaven, and so on and so forth. So, like when people ask me about Judaism, it says, is Judaism pro-women or against women? I say Judaism is pro-women. Jews are not always pro-women. It's not about the Torah in general. If you look, especially the first chapter of Bereshit tells us that men and women were created simultaneously, so they're equal. But it's the Jews, it's people who take it on a.
Where did my Maimonides base his theory?
That was also part of society at the time. Women were more submissive. He didn't say that it's done. There's a sweeping order. He says a husband must respect his wife. He speaks very highly of that. But he says if she's a rebellious woman. So to that I say, whenever when we speak about the different halachot, that in other rulings that Maimonides disagrees with other rabbis, and people say, no, I only follow Maimonides. Say, would you follow that as well? You should follow. When we follow Rambam, we don't only follow what Maimonides wrote, but we also have to think, what would he write had he lived today? He would definitely review certain things. So certain things are irrevocable, because it's halakha, Torah, Moshe Sinai, Torah. Other things are rabbinical, other things are customs, other things are influence of society. So this is definitely something that Maimonides would have changed. And according to that lines, you have to think. But people are afraid to touch it because they're afraid of what will follow, that others will say, oh, if you change this, then I could eat meat and dairy. No, you can't. It's like it's written in the Torah. You have to draw the line and review halakha when necessary. So one more halakha from Rabbi Meshash. This is about the terefot. We spoke about it several times about what is called galat meat and Bet Yosef and all that. A lot of it has to do with the tissues, extra tissues called sirchot that are found on the lung, and whether you could remove them or try to cut them to certain growths to determine whether there was a wound, if the lung was punctured and healed, and this is scar tissue, or that is something external. So Rabbi Meshash explains what is exactly what he called Seder HaNi'anua, because Moroccan Jews did follow the halakha that you could remove some of these growths to see if they are detachable, and he tells him exactly how to do that. And then he says this: V'zeu Seder HaNi'anua bli tosefet ubli migra'at. You don't have to do you cannot do less than that, but you're not allowed to do more than that. You can't try to determine that the animal is not kosher because you want to be strict. Why? It says הגורע מפסיד ממונם של ישראל וממון העניים של עזר הבשר. He says, if you don't check enough, because the way, like I said, to check it was to shake the lung until the thing falls. So if someone doesn't shake it enough and it doesn't fall, he says, oh, this growth is internal, it's a wound, and the meat is not kosher. He says, what you did, you thought that you're being strict, but what you did was you're being lenient by allowing yourself להפסיד ממונם של ישראל. You cause people to lose money. וממון העניים של עזר הבשר. Says the poor people rely on the income from selling meat. That was the arrangement in many communities, that there was a meat tax or shehita tax, that they would add more than what the meat would cost, and that would go to the soup kitchen to provide food for the poor. So he says there's direct damage of losing that animal, and indirect damage, future damage, where now there's less income and less money for the poor. You have to consider all that when you're going to determine whether something is kosher or not. It says, you should not add, you should not take away. Again, he uses biblical language. This is what Hashem tells Moshe regarding following the words of the judges, that you cannot add or take away, because there are consequences to everything. You can't say, let me be a little bit strict on that. It's okay if I can just do this, because eventually it causes, there are shockwaves that go to lengths that we cannot even imagine. It says, the keshem she'asur lachshir et haterefa, kach asur latrif et hakeshera. Just as you're not allowed to say that something which is taref is kosher, so you cannot say about something which is kasher that is not kosher. Right? והאלי בעזרך ושמר רגלך מלחד ושלום ילך מסביב. And he says, if you do this, God will protect you and help you, and you'll be blessed with peace. And that is also, this is an important message to the whole kashrut system that we have today, that people say, oh, it's always, you could go a little stricter, you could make, because everything is available. So if I slap, OU on a bottle of water, that's okay. We don't lose anything by that. No, yes we do, because then people start thinking, I could only buy this, I cannot buy that. And then it spreads over. The same with the glad meat. People say, we could work by the standards of glad or bet Yosef for everyone. Not a problem. But if you really communicate with people who live all over America or outside America, some people say, no, I can't afford this meat. I cannot afford this kind of product. But by creating this concept that this is the standard, now every time you upgrade the standard, it becomes this is the norm, and if you do less, you're not kosher, then people lose. And interesting, people lose because of that. Interesting psak similarly to that from someone who's maybe could be considered to be more extreme or more strict, and that's Rabbi Menashe Levi Klein. He's originally from the Hungarian Hasidic faction, and he was the Rabbi of Ungvar, and he writes in his book Mishneh Alachot, they had an argument with a man who studied in a kollel. So his wife works and he gets a stipend, and he blasted this guy for buying the more expensive cheese, which is Halav Israel, right? He said, how can you buy more expensive cheese when you rely on support from others? If you want to have a higher standard of kashrut and you want to spend money on that, go ahead, work, get your own money, and you spend it. But when you get money from others, you have to go for the lowest, or which is the norm. Rabbi Menashe Levi Klein, Mishneh Alachot, the 100%.
Why? But if you're giving tzedakah, I'm not giving tzedakah with with quote unquote.
No strings attached, right? So he didn't say that I could tell you what to go buy with it. It meant from an ethical point of view. From an ethical point of view, if you have a choice, like remember the movie Ushpizin?
Oh yeah, it's a great.
Right, about the guy, right, with the etrog. He gets money for tzedakah, and he spends a major portion of it on the etrog. and then his wife gets upset, and then, he's not allowed to do that. He's not allowed to do the halakha. And I'll tell you what, the more interesting thing about this movie, right. This is the interesting thing. It's almost like a nevuah about this movie. The movie is worth a discussion by itself. I saw the movie. There were certain things that were very, very touching. The idea of complete trust in Kadosh Baruch Hu, and God will provide. It's a story about a couple. There's nothing before Sukkot. They have no food. They're crying. And children, and he goes out to the field and he cries out to God.
The purpose was to have children. That's why he bought
Nachon. Right. And that to have an etrog is anyway. Someone who distributes money in the neighborhood distributes all his money before Sukkot, and he has $1,000 left. He doesn't know what to do with it. He says, "Do you have anyone?" He says, "I know this guy, Moshe Balanga. He needs the money," and he goes and he puts the money under his door. Unbelievable. But so he buys, he buys food with it, but the majority, and he buys jewelry for his wife, and then he also buys an etrog. And eventually, the etrog is destroyed by two of his ex-inmates, right?
He made a salad.
Made it into a salad, right? I think it's a lemon. So I saw the movie, there were certain things that I connected with, and certain things that I didn't. I mean, like this whole scene of, he goes out to the field and he cries out to God. Yes, you have to do that. You have to pray, but you also have to go out and work. But then the protagonist of the movie, Shuli Rand, became a big, a celebrity in Israel. He wrote several songs. Baal Teshuvah. There's one song. There's like Ribono Shel Olam. Great song. Only problem is that a while ago he disappeared. His wife was very worried, turned to the police. It turns out that he ran away from home because he had debts that he couldn't pay, and he was beating his wife. So it's like, we go back to the original story that we started with, right? That how can I take now this movie, he was the director, he was the protagonist. Shuli Rand.
He separated now.
They separated because he physically was his wife. She should have gone to the police. She should have no. She didn't know that it was because of that. They were worried about him. But just to add to that, there were cases of domestic abuse in Israel in the religious community where the woman turned to when she went to the Bedin. It was in Masha'arim. Next to where I lived in Yerushalayim. She went to Bedin several times. They didn't do anything. Almost like saying, he's entitled to it. She eventually took pictures of him. With the hidden camera. It was like years ago, before the technology was so. So she took pictures of him and she took it to the police, and they went after him. But the result was that her community went after her. So if we go, to conclude all that, here's the balance. If you really want to be strict, and you have the option of either being strict about, levels of kashrut, or making sure that one person will not be harmed physically, what is the priority? This is the most important thing of protecting oneself.
Isn't that so from the Torah to hit another Jew?
100%. That's
how they figured this out. Why is it
it's
your wife?
It's exactly. Yeah.
It's a story with the Satmar Rebbe from Williamsburg.
Yeah.
One from Chassidic come to tell him Rabbi, I say סגולה לפרנסה, the whole chapter Tehillim, the Parashat Amam.
Yeah.
Everything is fine till 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock, you need to go to
That's a good point, because just recently everybody was sending around the Parashat Amam last week. And everybody was saying, you have to pray. So what he's saying, the Rabbi said, you could say all the prayers until 8 o'clock, then go to work. So I will tell you. But I'll tell you, add one more thing. Edna asked me, because my wife got like 100 messages from all his friends, like, read this parasha. Right. And they said, it says, you say the prayer and you trust God, because you don't need to work too hard for prayer, for parnasa. She says, so I could trust God without the prayer. I don't need to, reading this prayer at this time shows that you don't trust God, because you only have to do it at that time. Anyway,